guys! So today I want to talk about some of the books that I read in May. After coming back from university, I sort of just went a little intense with my reading, so I have too many books to talk about in one video, so I'm going to, I think, split it up into two sections. One thing I also noticed is that in the last month, I've only read 2 books by male authors, which is, I don't know if it's that interesting, but in times of great distress and missing reading, I just go female only. The first book I read this month was The Essex Serpent, and this is a historical fiction novel set in Essex in the 1890s. It follows a young widow who moves to a small town with her son, and there she indulges her passion for becoming a naturalist, so she explores the natural world, and she's very interested in science, and she likes looking at the environment and cataloging new species, and this interest kind of comes into play because the local townspeople think that there is a mythical serpent sort of crawling around, and she thinks that this is the new specimen of a previously undiscovered species. In the book, she also strikes up a friendship with the local vicar, and so a good portion of the book is that burgeoning friendship. So this book is very, very slow. It's very much a character-oriented book, and it also spends a lot of time developing the environment and describing the natural world, which isn't something I normally like. But in this case, I felt that the writing, I so much enjoyed the writing style, which was sort of elaborate, but not overdone. A few things I didn't enjoy about this book, though, were, for one, how it chose to explore its themes, because I think it made a very conscious effort to explore some things, such as the relationship between science and religion, and how they were sort of at odds at the end of the 19th century, where previously people were very much religious, but now there was this new wave of science, and a lot of people were trying to sort of intertwine their understanding of the two, and but I felt that was very heavy-handed in the sense that you might have a debate where Cora the widow is debating with the vicar, where he, the religious man, is like, I like religion, it makes me feel good, and God is important, and Cora's like, no he's not, science and rationalism is good. And at the end I felt like that was all I was getting from these debates, where it was very much just like, I almost could have written them myself, and I didn't feel like a lot was genuinely done to explore the topic. And I feel like that was it with the other themes as well. So things like, for example, gender, and how Cora chooses to sometimes not dress in a way befitting a lady, or has this sort of unladylike interest in science and the natural world. And I felt like the book just kind of plopped that down in front of me and was like, Cora's unladylike, and people react badly to her. And then just like didn't go any deeper. Or the superstitions of the town people concerning the Essex Serpent, where again I just felt like, yes, people in a small town are superstitious, look at them being superstitious. And I didn't feel like the book gave me anything about those themes, but just sort of put them down and was like, here you go. As well, I really was put off by one relationship in the book, which I think developed at the expense of the believability of several other characters, which I know is very vague, but it does sort of culminate near the end of the book, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but I feel like the book handled characters so dishonestly in the denouement of this plot that it put me off very intensely. But despite that, I know a lot of people did really like this book, and I think it does a lot of interesting things with writing, and the characters are remarkably vivid. I think it is very rarely that I read a book where I can not remember much that happened in the book, but still have such a vivid portrait of almost every single character. And I do think that is remarkable, and definitely a testament to Sarah Perry's writing. And so because I know that a lot of people did really enjoy this book, I think that the things that put me off are more personal. So if you like the idea of a slow book that's character-driven and has very good writing and sort of an emphasis on nature and this beautiful landscape, it is probably something that you'll enjoy. So the next book I read was The Penelope App by Margaret Atwood. And this is written from the perspective of Penelope, when Odysseus leaves for 20 years to fight in the Trojan War, and she stays at home with her son in Ithaca, and the palace is slowly overrun by suitors who want to marry her so they can get the kingdom, because they think Odysseus is dead. As well, the book has it has the Greek element of a chorus, but the chorus here is the servant woman who slept with the suitors when they were still in the palace, and when Odysseus returned, were killed by him. And so the book really explores how the servant women were killed so brutally in the Odyssey, with so little empathy given towards them in that story, and I think a lot of its motivation is sort of giving empathy to those that were overlooked in the Odyssey. But I don't think that it did a very good job of that, because the Odyssey, or if you read Homer, the characters are quite detached, right? Like, not much emphasis is given to character development so much as this great epic that is being unfolded. And so I think that the motivation behind a lot of myth retellings is to give people in these stories a backstory. So I think that a fundamental or integral part of a myth retelling is to add something new to the story. And Margaret Atwood does add this feminist spin where you give a woman a new perspective and a sort of a chance to tell their story. But the characters were so flat, and the timeline in this book was so odd, because it covers 20 years and it's a very short book, but I didn't feel like I think you could have done that in a way that was better than what this book did, which was that sometimes it would sort of like skip along and then stop at a certain time, and then it would skip along and then stop at a certain time, and it sometimes felt very arbitrary. And I just did not connect with any of the characters. Even Penelope, whose perspective this was from, I feel like she just didn't seem real to me. I do like that this book attempts to give the serving girls a narrative, and I do like a few interesting things that the book did with Penelope's perspective, in the sense that she's telling us the story from the underworld, and I like how the book sort of comment on some things in the modern world that Penelope in the underworld is experiencing. But that was kind of cool, but it's almost a gimmick compared to what the book is actually trying to do. And so I think in the end, I just really didn't enjoy this. I don't think it did a good job. I think that it was sort of trite and over the head with a lot of its feminist references. I didn't like the chorus from the serving woman, because sometimes I just felt like I was almost embarrassed reading some of the choruses because it just felt so over the head. I don't know, I just really didn't enjoy this book, and it was probably my least favorite thing I've read by Margaret Atwood. But then I did read another Greek myth retelling, which I did really enjoy, and that's Cersei by Madeline Miller. And this follows the life of Cersei from birth. Cersei is the daughter of Helios, the Titan sun god, and a nymph. After she comes to realize that she has magical powers, she is exiled to an island, and she features in Greek mythology in the story most heavily in Odysseus' story, where he stays in her island for several days, also in the story of Jason, where he and Medea come to visit her. And I just really enjoyed this novel. The novel begins with the sentence, "When I was born, the word for what I was did not exist." And we know who she is as the readers because we know what she becomes in Greek mythology, but Cersei doesn't. And the book is about her forging that identity and creating this life and persona for herself in such a beautiful way. Like, I just absolutely love this book. I love the writing, which let me see what Cersei saw and felt what she felt. And I love the characters, which were so vivid and beautiful, and you just saw this beautiful portrait of every person that Cersei interacted with. I love the plot, which was riveting, which seems almost impossible considering the fact that it covers so many years, right? This is an immortal being, and you're covering a very large portion, a fair chunk of years. But I was never bored, and I loved the pacing. There was no point at which I was like, oh, I feel like this is going slowly. Even when it was going slowly, I was like, things are still happening and I'm still fascinated. After reading this book, it's not like it taught me anything about the meaning of life. I don't think it's a particularly deep book. There's not much to really unpack, but books don't always need to. And this is this engaging, enthralling, and compassionate attempt to give Cersei a history, which I would recommend to nearly everyone. Another book I read this month was The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine Valente. And this is a collection of short stories written from the perspective of refrigerated women. So women who were killed or kidnapped or hurt or disabled or in some way sidelined for the sake of progressing a male character's plot. And so these are superheroes, villains, girlfriends of superheroes, all these women telling their stories from the afterlife, post being sort of shunted in the real world. And Catherine Valente is an incredible writer in the sense that she has this way with words that is almost unequaled. And so what she does is she gives every single one of these characters a completely different prose style, and she just drops you into their world and their story. Like, for instance, she went right from the perspective of a girlfriend of a supervillain, where the style is more colloquial and kind of like badass-like, and she's very she's quite like crude in a lot of ways, and so the story and so the entire style of the story changes to fit that. But then in another story, you might have a superhero who's like, I don't know, she's like shooting through space, and you have this this ethereal, breathless quality, and so in every single story, she just creates this new world with her language, which is actually remarkable. So the book itself isn't very deep in the sense that the moral is that these women are sidelined for the sake of male characters, and so every story just hammers in that point in a way that is kind of repetitive. It's something that I did really enjoy, and I think that if the premise of all these women telling their stories appeals to you, and if you like the idea of an author experimenting with language and really creating these distinct prose styles, that sounds kind of fun to you, then it probably will be. And last book I'm going to talk about is Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I cannot talk about this book objectively. It is one of my favorite books of all time, probably 85% because of the sentimental value that it holds for me. It was a book that I read a lot when I was younger. It also got me back into reading, where for a few years in my middle school life, I didn't read very much. I was very interested in television and sort of fandom and things like that when I was younger, and I'd sort of gotten out of the habit of reading, and I was just bored if I'd read. And I remember one day I sat down and I started reading Anne of Green Gables, and I was really bored, and I was like, ugh, I don't want to read this, but I wanted to continue for the sake of sentiment. And I did. And I was like, gradually, I sort of got used to reading again, and that's what got me back into reading, like during high school and up until now. And so I'm so, like, I cannot be objective about this book. The plot follows Anne, who is an orphan who is adopted by two siblings living in a small town on Prince Edward Island. And this book just follows her childhood, and then after that there's several other books in the series which follow her life. And it's not, like, nothing like huge happens. It's about like her getting into these mishaps as a child, or just about the trajectory that her life takes. It just makes me happy. Like, I can't say that it has like the deepest characters or the most meaningful anything, but after I read it, I just feel good about the world. And so I'll probably continue to read the rest of the books in the series. I don't know. I'm not capable of comprehending this book objectively enough to recommend it or not recommend it. I think that's something that if you read it in childhood, you'll appreciate it a lot more as an adult. I know some people have read it as adults and they didn't really care about it that much because it was sort of corny and they were like, it's a little outdated, but no, it's the best. I actually adore it. So yeah, that was the first half of my May reading wrap-up. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, if you intend to read them, thoughts on them, if you agree, disagree, because I know sometimes I become kind of harsh in my reviews, and that's obviously, like, if you adored a book, then I would love to hear why, even if I absolutely hated it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day.